He wielded her clan's sword to protect her. Oblivious, he now had to become her husband. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Ethan Walker had always prided himself on being a warrior who worked alone. A seasoned fighter with years of experience. He'd never been one for attachments. Never cared much for the politics that came with his line of work. His only goal had always been to get the job done and move on. So when he was hired to protect the daughter of a powerful family, Arya Valente, he didn't think much of it. He was simply another mercenary doing what he did best, keeping dangerous people at bay. But the moment he met Arya, things took a turn he hadn't expected. She was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Strong, confident, and fiercely independent. Arya seemed to have everything under control. But there was a sadness in her eyes. A burden she carried that Ethan couldn't quite understand. She didn't trust him at first. And who could blame her? Ethan was just a stranger, after all. Yet, over time, as they found themselves caught in dangerous situations together, Ethan began to see the cracks in her armor. Arya wasn't the cold, unapproachable woman she portrayed. Beneath her stoic exterior, she was just a person, struggling with her own responsibilities and fears. Ethan couldn't help but feel drawn to her, not just as a protector but as something more. Despite himself, he found his thoughts lingering on her, his heart beating a little faster whenever she spoke to him. But he quickly pushed those feelings aside. He was a warrior, after all, not someone who could afford distractions. As the days passed, Arya grew more comfortable with him, though she still kept her distance. She didn't want to rely on anyone, especially not a man who was only there for the paycheck. But there was something about Ethan that made her feel safe, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Little did Ethan know, his mission was about to take an unexpected turn. The deeper he became involved in Arya's life, the more complicated things became. He wasn't just her protector anymore. He was being pulled into a whirlwind of obligations, politics, and, surprisingly, something that resembled love. The world around them was shifting. And soon, Ethan would find himself not just fighting for Arya's safety, but facing a decision that would change everything. He would have to marry her. And he had no idea how that would fit into the life he'd spent so long building. Days passed, and the bond between Ethan and Arya grew stronger. Though it remained unspoken, Ethan was still primarily focused on his role as a protector, keeping a safe distance emotionally. He had made it clear to himself that his job was to ensure Arya's safety and nothing more. Yet, the more time they spent together, the more difficult it became to ignore the subtle shifts in their relationship. There was a certain trust between them now, one that had been built through countless conversations and shared moments of vulnerability. Arya, for her part, still wore her armor. She had always been the one in control, the one with the answers. But Ethan had a way of making her feel heard, something no one else had ever done before. Despite her initial reluctance to rely on him, she found herself turning to him when the weight of her responsibilities became too much to bear. It was in these quiet moments, when the world outside felt distant and uncertain, that Arya realized how much she had come to depend on Ethan. She knew that, as strong as she was, there were things she couldn't face alone. And somehow, she knew Ethan would be there for her. But their growing closeness didn't go unnoticed. The Valente family, once a symbol of power and influence, was beginning to face more than just external threats. Within their own ranks, There were whispers of betrayal, of a plot to take the family down from within. Arya's father, who had always been the pillar of the family, was growing weaker with age, and the pressure on her to take over was mounting. She could feel the eyes of the world on her, and the weight of the family legacy pressing down. It was during one of these tense moments, as Ethan and Arya stood together in the quiet of the family's estate, that the conversation took a sudden turn. You know, Ethan, Arya said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. There's more at stake here than just my safety. My family. Everything I've known. It's all crumbling. Ethan turned to look at her, his eyes softening as he stepped closer. I don't know the full story, Arya, but I know this. You don't have to face it alone. Whatever comes, I'll be by your side. His words hung in the air, a promise that neither of them could yet fully comprehend. Arya swallowed hard, feeling the lump form in her throat. She wanted to say more, wanted to explain everything, but the weight of her responsibilities was too much. She couldn't afford to let herself be vulnerable, not with everything she had to protect. I know you mean that, she replied, her voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. But sometimes, I wonder if you understand the cost of getting involved with me. The Valente name isn't something you can escape once you're tied to it. You might think you're just here to protect me, but there are consequences to that. Ethan's face hardened, the brief flicker of concern turning into resolve. If the cost is standing by your side, then I'm willing to pay it. I don't care about the consequences. I care about you. Arya's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know how to respond. She had never allowed herself to entertain the idea of love, not in the way Ethan was speaking. Her world had always been one of duty, of sacrifices made for the good of her family and their legacy. But Ethan was different. The weight of his words settled in her chest, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of something other than obligation. For a brief moment, the air between them was charged with something unspoken. Something that neither of them could ignore any longer. But before either of them could say another word, a loud knock on the door interrupted the moment. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. The knock on the door was sharp, breaking the quiet moment between Ethan and Arya. Both turned instinctively, the heavy atmosphere around them shifting as they prepared to face whatever came next. Arya's heart skipped a beat, her mind racing with the possibilities. Whoever was on the other side of that door could mean trouble. And trouble was something Arya could no longer avoid. I'll go, Ethan said, his voice calm but filled with authority. Stay here. But Arya didn't want to stay behind. She had always been in control, always the one leading the way. But something about Ethan's words felt different. He wasn't giving orders. He was protecting her. No, Arya replied firmly, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves inside her. I'm not hiding, Ethan. If this involves my family, I need to be there. Ethan hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers. There was a quiet understanding between them. She wasn't the kind of woman who hid behind others. And she wasn't about to start now. Then we go together, he said, his voice softening. Together. They made their way to the door, Ethan opening it slowly. A servant stood outside, his face pale and urgent. Lady Arya, the servant said breathlessly. The council is calling for you. They need to speak with you immediately. Arya's stomach twisted. The council was composed of the most powerful figures in the region. And to be summoned meant something serious was happening. She nodded once, her expression hardening. I'll be there shortly, she said, her voice even. But Ethan could hear the undercurrent of tension in her words. The servant left, closing the door behind him. And Arya turned to Ethan. It's not good, she murmured. The council wouldn't call me unless it was urgent. It's about my family's future. Ethan's gaze softened as he reached for her arm. Whatever it is, I'm with you. His words were a promise. One that meant more than just protection. Arya's breath hitched slightly at the sincerity in his voice. She didn't realize until now just how much she had come to rely on him. How much she needed him by her side. She wasn't sure when things had shifted. When the lines between duty and emotion had blurred. But standing here, in this moment, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The council meeting was in one of the grand chambers of the estate. A place reserved for important matters. Arya walked with Ethan by her side. Every step heavier than the last. The closer they got, the more she felt the weight of what was happening. The pressure of expectations bearing down on her. The room was filled with the most influential members of her family's inner circle. All looking at her with serious expressions. Her father, once the strongest figure in the room, sat at the head of the table, his face drawn and weary. The sight of him made Arya's chest tighten. "Arya," her father said, his voice hoarse, "we need to discuss your future." Arya nodded, taking her place at the table. Ethan stood slightly behind her, his presence a silent but firm support. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she knew that the decisions made here would shape everything that came after. "We've received reports of unrest," one of the council members said. "There are whispers of betrayal within the family. We need to act quickly, or everything we've built could be lost." The words hit Arya like a cold wind, and she felt her heart race. The family's legacy was built on power and trust, and to have that threatened was something she couldn't afford to ignore. But there was more at stake than just her family's reputation. She could feel Ethan's steady presence behind her, and in that moment, she realized that protecting her family might no longer be the only thing she cared about. Whatever the council decided, she wasn't sure if it was the family's future that would matter most. It was something deeper. Something far more personal. The room was heavy with silence as the council members exchanged worried glances. Their faces a mixture of concern and frustration. Arya sat at the head of the table, her posture straight, her mind racing as the gravity of the situation settled in. The whispers of betrayal within the family were no longer just rumors. They were becoming a reality. One of the council members, an older man with graying hair, spoke up. "We've received credible information that someone within the inner circle is working against us. We need to act swiftly, or we risk losing everything." Arya's heart sank. This wasn't just about her family's reputation anymore. This was about survival. As the tension in the room grew, Ethan's presence behind her was a quiet comfort. His unwavering support a reminder that she wasn't facing this alone. She could feel his steady gaze on her, and it gave her strength to keep her composure. "What exactly do we know about this threat?" Arya asked, her voice calm but sharp, betraying none of the fear she felt inside. The council member who had spoken earlier sighed heavily. "We don't know much yet, but we have reason to believe that someone close to your father is involved. We need to find out who, and quickly." The words hung in the air like a cloud of dread. Arya's thoughts immediately turned to her father. He had always been the rock of their family, the one who kept everything together. But lately, he had seemed more fragile, more distant. Was he losing control? Was someone manipulating him from the inside? Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady. "I'll do whatever it takes to help," he said. His eyes locked on Arya's. "We can't let this go unnoticed." Arya glanced at him, her heart skipping a beat at his unwavering loyalty. She wasn't used to letting others in, especially when it came to matters of the family. But in this moment, she realized how much she needed him. "Thank you, Ethan," she said quietly, her voice full of gratitude. "But this is my fight. I can't risk involving anyone else." Ethan didn't argue. He knew better than to push her. But he also knew that, deep down, Arya wasn't truly alone in this fight anymore. The council continued discussing strategies. But Arya's mind was elsewhere, lost in the weight of her responsibilities. She knew that her family's future was at a crossroads, and the decisions made in this room would shape the legacy of the Valente name for generations to come. As the meeting drew to a close, Arya stood, her resolve hardening. "We'll handle this," she said, her voice firm. "I'll take care of it." The council members nodded, their expressions still tense. But they trusted her. They knew that Arya was capable, that she had the strength to lead them through the storm. As the room emptied, Ethan remained at her side, his presence a constant reminder that she wasn't alone. Arya couldn't help but feel a pang of uncertainty. She had always been the one in control, the one making the tough decisions. But now, for the first time, she was beginning to wonder if her path was truly her own to choose. Was she destined to carry the weight of her family's legacy? Or was there another future out there for her? One where she didn't have to sacrifice everything for the sake of others? She didn't know the answer. But one thing was certain. Ethan had become an undeniable part of her journey, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could deny the connection that was growing between them. The days that followed the council meeting felt heavier than ever for Arya. Each decision she made seemed to carry the weight of her entire family's future. And with each passing moment, the burden grew. Her father's health was deteriorating faster than anyone had anticipated, and though he still clung to his position as the leader of the Valente family, it was clear that his time was running out. Arya spent every waking hour with him, ensuring that the family's affairs were in order. She couldn't afford to show any weakness, not with everything on the line. Ethan, as always, was by her side. He had become her constant in a world that was rapidly spiraling out of control. Despite her best efforts to keep him at arm's length, his presence brought her a sense of peace she hadn't known she needed. She tried not to lean on him too much, but when the weight of her responsibilities felt like it might crush her, she found herself seeking his quiet strength. "You've been working non-stop," Ethan said one evening, his voice low as they walked together through the gardens of the estate. The cool evening air was a welcome relief from the stuffy atmosphere of the council chambers. "You need to take a break, Arya. You can't carry all of this on your own." Arya shook her head, her expression tight. "I don't have a choice. Ethan, my father, the council, they all expect me to take over. There's no time to rest." Ethan stopped walking and turned to face her. His eyes were soft, but his tone was firm. "You don't have to do it all by yourself. You have people who care about you. People who want to help." Arya's heart tightened at his words. She had always been the one who took charge, the one who bore the burden of everyone else's expectations. She had never allowed herself the luxury of relying on others. But Ethan's unwavering support made her wonder if it was time to let go of that pride, to allow herself to trust in someone else. "I don't know how to let go," she admitted quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan reached out and gently cupped her chin, lifting her gaze to meet his. "You don't have to let go completely, but you don't have to carry it all alone either." His words were simple, yet they struck something deep within her. For the first time in a long time, Arya allowed herself to close her eyes and lean into his touch. She had always kept everyone at arm's length, afraid that if she let anyone too close, they would see her weaknesses. But with Ethan, she didn't feel like she had to hide. She could be vulnerable, and that realization was both terrifying and freeing. As they stood there, the world seemed to fade away, and for a moment, Arya allowed herself to breathe, to be still, to feel something other than the crushing weight of responsibility. When she opened her eyes again, Ethan's expression had softened, but there was something else in his gaze, a deep, unspoken understanding. He didn't need to say anything for her to know that he was here, that he was ready to stand by her no matter what came next. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "for being here." Ethan gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Always." The moment was brief, but it left a lasting impact on Arya. She knew that no matter how difficult the days ahead would be, she wouldn't have to face them alone. And for the first time in a long while, that thought gave her a sense of peace. As they turned and walked back toward the house, Arya realized that the path ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear. Her journey was no longer just about duty or family legacy. It was about something much deeper. Something that had started to bloom between them in the quietest of moments. Trust. And perhaps, something that could one day be called love. The following days were filled with an unspoken tension that neither Arya nor Ethan could ignore. While the council had decided to focus on rooting out the traitors within the family, Arya knew that time was running out. Every passing day, her father grew weaker, and the threats against her family's legacy became more real. As much as she wanted to focus on the task at hand, she couldn't shake the growing connection between herself and Ethan. The moments they shared, though few, had started to change something inside her. She had always been so focused on duty, on being the perfect leader for her family, that she had never allowed herself to truly feel. But Ethan was different. He wasn't like the others in her life. He didn't see her as just the heir to the Valente name. He saw her, Arya, a woman burdened by responsibilities and trapped by expectations. And somehow, he made her feel like she wasn't alone. Late one evening, after the council had disbanded for the day, Arya found herself walking alone in the garden, the cool breeze brushing against her skin. She needed a moment to think, to breathe without the constant weight of her family's problems pressing down on her. She was lost in her thoughts when she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Ethan approaching, his presence a steady comfort. "I thought you could use some fresh air," he said softly. Arya gave him a small smile, grateful for his presence. "It's hard to breathe sometimes, with everything that's happening," she admitted, her voice quiet. Ethan nodded, his gaze softening. "I can't imagine how heavy it must feel. But you don't have to carry it all by yourself." Arya stopped walking, her heart racing as his words sank in. She had never allowed herself to lean on anyone before. She had always been the one others turned to, the one who had to be strong. But in this moment, with Ethan standing beside her, she realized how much she longed to let go, to trust someone else with the burden she had been carrying for so long. "I don't know how to stop being in control," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan stepped closer, his presence grounding her. "You don't have to stop being in control, Arya. You just have to let someone else share the load with you." His words were simple, but they held a depth she hadn't expected. She had always been afraid to let anyone close, afraid that if she did, they would see her as weak. But with Ethan, she didn't feel weak. She felt understood. "I've never let anyone in," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "Not like this." Ethan reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to let go of everything. Just let me be here for you when you need it. That's all." The sincerity in his eyes took her breath away. For the first time in a long time, Arya allowed herself to feel something other than fear and responsibility. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes as she allowed herself a moment of peace. The world around them seemed to fade away as she realized that, for once, she didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. The moment stretched on, timeless, and for the first time, Arya felt a spark of hope. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, or what her family's future would look like. But she knew that with Ethan by her side, whatever came next, they would face it together. When she opened her eyes, she found herself standing closer to Ethan, their faces just inches apart. The quiet understanding between them was undeniable. Arya wasn't sure what the future held, but in that moment, she was no longer afraid to face it with someone else. And somehow, that made all the difference. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings and decisions. The threat to her family was growing more real by the hour. And every new piece of information that came to light seemed to complicate things even further. Arya felt like she was losing control. And yet, she couldn't afford to show any weakness. Her father's condition had worsened, and though he tried to keep his resolve, it was clear to everyone in the family that his time as the head of the Valente clan was coming to an end. As the days passed, Arya found herself relying more and more on Ethan. He was a steady presence in her life now, someone who stood by her through the most difficult moments. It wasn't just his strength that kept her grounded. It was his quiet confidence and his unwavering support. He never pressured her to make decisions or lean on him, but he was always there when she needed him, ready to offer a reassuring word or a comforting silence. It was in moments like this, when they found themselves alone together, that Arya allowed herself to be vulnerable. The weight of the family's expectations, the burden of leadership, had been hers for so long that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to share that weight with someone else. Ethan had shown her that it was okay to let go, even if just for a moment. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, Arya found herself standing outside, looking out over the vast estate. The world seemed so still. The only sounds the distant calls of birds and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. It was a rare moment of peace. You know, Ethan's voice came from behind her, soft but steady. You don't have to carry this burden alone. Arya turned to see him standing just a few feet away, his expression serious yet filled with understanding. I know, she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. But it feels like I have to. I can't let anyone else bear this weight for me. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. You don't have to do it all yourself, Arya. You don't have to carry the world on your shoulders. You have people who care about you, people who want to help. Arya felt a lump form in her throat. She had always been so determined to keep everyone at arm's length, to protect herself from the vulnerability that came with letting others in. But with Ethan, it was different. She had never felt so understood. I don't know how to trust anyone, she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. Not like this. Ethan reached out, placing a hand gently on her arm. You don't have to trust everyone, Arya, but you can trust me. His words were simple, but they struck a chord deep within her. Arya looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. There was something in his eyes, something that told her he wasn't just saying words. He meant them. For the first time in a long time, Arya allowed herself to let go of her fears, to let herself believe that there could be someone she could trust. Slowly, she nodded. I'm afraid, she confessed, her voice trembling. Afraid of what might happen if I let go of control. Ethan smiled softly, his expression warm and reassuring. It's okay to be afraid, he said gently. But you don't have to do this alone. Whatever happens, I'll be here for you. His words, so simple and so sincere, were exactly what Arya needed to hear. She had always been afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of letting others see the cracks in her armor. But with Ethan, she didn't have to hide. She didn't have to be perfect. She could be herself. As they stood there, the evening sky darkening above them, Arya realized something she hadn't allowed herself to admit before. She was no longer alone. Ethan wasn't just a protector or an ally. He was something more. In that moment, Arya knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of her responsibilities ease just a little. With Ethan by her side, She didn't have to carry everything on her own. She could share the burden. And for that, she was truly grateful. The days that followed were a blur of urgency and decision-making. The Valente family's future hung in the balance. And Arya felt the pressure more with each passing hour. She had never been one to shy away from responsibility. But now the weight of it was starting to crush her. With her father's health declining and the threat of betrayal within the family growing stronger, Arya knew that time was running out. She needed to act quickly. But every choice seemed to carry immense consequences. Ethan had remained by her side through it all. His presence a steady reminder that she wasn't completely alone in this fight. Every day, his support became more vital. He was not only a protector but a confidant. His quiet understanding made it easier for Arya to face the difficult decisions ahead. Still, she couldn't ignore the growing feelings between them. As the hours stretched into days, Arya found herself drawn to him in ways she hadn't expected. She had always been guarded, unwilling to let anyone close enough to see the cracks in her carefully built armor. But with Ethan, it was different. She found herself letting down her walls, even if only for a moment. One evening, after another tense meeting with the council, Arya walked alone through the estate's courtyard, her mind racing. The cool night air did little to calm the storm. Inside her, she had never felt so torn. Between her duty to her family, her fear of the future, and the unexpected emotions that Ethan stirred in her, she paused by a stone fountain, staring into the rippling water. Lost in thought, Arya, Ethan's voice cut through the silence, and she turned to see him standing just a few feet away. His expression was soft but serious, his eyes full of concern. "You've been carrying this all on your own for far too long," he said, his voice gentle but insistent. "You don't have to do it all. You don't have to bear this weight by yourself." Arya's heart clenched at his words. She had known this for a while, but hearing it from him made it real. She wasn't sure why, but with Ethan, the truth of her situation felt easier to admit. "I don't know how to let go," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always been the one in charge. I've never had anyone else to rely on." Ethan stepped closer, his presence calm and steady. "You don't have to do this alone," he repeated. "I'm here, Arya, and I always will be." His words seemed to hang in the air, full of promise and reassurance. Arya looked up at him, her chest tightening. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that it was okay to rely on someone else. "What if I make the wrong choice?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What if I fail?" Ethan reached out, gently touching her arm. "You won't fail," he said firmly. "You're not alone in this, Arya. And you don't have to be perfect. You're doing the best you can. And that's enough." For a moment, Arya let his words wash over her, taking in the comfort they offered. She had always been afraid of letting anyone see her vulnerabilities, of admitting that she wasn't invincible. But with Ethan, she didn't feel like she had to hide anymore. Slowly, she allowed herself to take a deep breath, letting go of some of the weight she had been carrying. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan smiled softly, his eyes warm and reassuring. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "And whatever comes next, we'll face it together." In that moment, Arya realized that no matter what the future held, she didn't have to face it alone. With Ethan by her side, she felt stronger, more capable. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry everything on her shoulders. With Ethan's support, she could finally share the burden. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The weeks that followed were marked by a constant state of tension. Arya could feel the pressure mounting with every passing day, the weight of her family's future pressing down on her chest like a storm ready to break. Her father's condition continued to deteriorate, and with every council meeting, the stakes grew higher. The whispers of betrayal within the family were no longer just rumors. They had become a real, present threat. Arya found herself facing the possibility that she might lose everything she had worked so hard to protect. But in the midst of the chaos, one thing had become certain. Ethan had become her anchor. He was there, unwavering, offering his strength when she felt like she was barely holding on. Despite all the turmoil around them, Ethan had remained by her side. And with each passing day, Arya found herself leaning on him more and more. She had always been the one to carry the weight of responsibility. But with Ethan, she began to understand the value of sharing that burden. One evening, after yet another exhausting meeting with the council, Arya found herself walking alone in the garden. Her mind clouded with doubt. The path ahead seemed uncertain, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep pretending she had everything under control. The weight of her family's legacy felt like it was too much to bear. Arya, Ethan's voice cut through the silence, and she turned to see him standing just a few feet away. He had been watching her from a distance, sensing her turmoil. "You don't have to do this alone." Arya looked at him, her heart heavy with unspoken words. "I don't know if I can keep going, Ethan," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "I'm not sure I'm strong enough to carry all of this." Ethan took a step toward her, his expression softening. "You are stronger than you think," he said quietly. "But strength doesn't mean doing everything by yourself. You don't have to carry it all alone. I'm here, always." His words, gentle but firm, made Arya's heart swell with emotion. For the first time in what felt like ages, she allowed herself to breathe, to let go of the constant tension she had been holding inside. "I don't know how to trust anyone with this," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always had to do everything myself. Letting go of that control is terrifying." Ethan's gaze never wavered. "It's okay to be scared," he said, his voice filled with understanding. "But you don't have to do it all on your own. Trust me, Arya. Let me help you." His words were simple, but they held a depth that reached her heart. Arya felt her defenses begin to crumble. For the first time in so long, she felt the walls she had built around herself start to fall away. She had always been the one others depended on, never allowing anyone to see the cracks beneath the surface. But with Ethan, it was different. He saw her, not as the heir to the Valente name, but as Arya, a woman struggling to navigate a world of impossible expectations. She swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "But I don't want to do it alone anymore." Ethan stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "You don't have to," he said, his voice filled with quiet certainty. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Arya felt a surge of emotion rise within her, and for the first time in a long while, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her own. With Ethan by her side, she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they stood there in the fading light, Arya realized that she wasn't just the leader of the Valente family. She was someone who deserved love, support, and the freedom to be vulnerable. Ethan had shown her that, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She didn't have all the answers, but with Ethan beside her, she knew she had the strength to face whatever came next.